belonging to Blackness. Welcome to Season 6 of the podcast. I'm your host, Dr. India Lorick Wilmot. Welcome to another episode. Today's guest is Pulitzer Prize winning author and National Magazine Award winner, Mitchell Jackson. He currently holds the John O. Whitman Dean's Distinguished Professorship in the English Department at Arizona State University. Mitchell's debut novel, titled The Residue Years, which is about a complex relationship between a mother with addictions and a son who is a drug dealer, won both Whiting Award and the Ernest J. Gaines Prize for Literary Excellence. His memoir/essay collection, Survival Math: Notes on All-American Family, was named a Best Book of 2019 by 15 publications. Mitchell's most recent book, Fly, the Big Book of Basketball Fashion, is a USA Today bestseller. A recipient of several fellowships, grants, and awards from organizations such as the Guggenheim Foundation, Creative Capital, the Cullman Center, Penn, and a host of other institutions, you can frequent Mitchell's writings, often featured in the New York Times Magazine, Time, Esquire, Harper's Bazaar, the Paris Review, The Guardian, and elsewhere. We are especially thrilled to sit with a writer whose real life in his younger years may have mirrored the storylines typically found in, say, a Walter Dean Myers or a Kwame Alexander book, but uses storytelling to inspire and transform the lives of others. Welcome, Mitchell.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So we're looking forward to learning more about what it means to belong to Blackness for you. So are you ready?
I am ready, yeah.
All right, let's get into it. Act 1, Call to Adventure. All right, Mitchell. So much of what inspires us and gives us purpose is autobiographically rooted. You grew up in Northeast Portland, Oregon, the oldest of 3 boys, with a mom, Lily, who struggled with drug addiction at that time. You also had an absentee biological father, Wesley, until you were about 10 years old. Yet you were surrounded by a community of relatives, family, friends, and folks, some of whom were hustlers and pimps, but still there was love and care that you experienced. So how has your family life upbringing inspired you to focus on the impossible dream of becoming a writer? And I'm really thinking about your great-grandmother, Mama Edie's influence, Big Chris, Grandpa Sam, for example.
Man, you know my people. I feel like you're one of my cousins. Thank you for mentioning those people. And I didn't realize this growing up, but all of them in their own way were storytellers. My great-grandmother, Mama Edie, who was the matriarch of our family, was a storyteller, and a lot of her stories revolved around the Bible, trying to instill values and morals and really religiosity in her great-grandchildren and grandchildren and children. And then there was my stepfather, Chris, who stepped in, and his storytelling usually included some form of humor, but it also had a lot of flair to it. If I think about some of the diction that I try to approximate or the cadences, the turn of phrase on the page, a lot of that I think is owed to Big Chris or Dad and how he told his stories. I remember he would joke with us when we were kids. He would say, "You want to go ride by Grandma's house?" We'd be like, yeah, cool, let's go. And then we would drive by his mother's house. And then when we got to the house, he would go real slow. And he would say, "Okay, we just rode by Grandma's house." And he would get me with that like so many times. I should not have fallen for it. But so that was the kind of thing that he would do. And then my mother, she's like a memoirist. Like she'll take elements of my life and my childhood and she'll retell them to me in a way that's fascinating. And I'm like, "Mom, did that really happen in that way?" Like I almost need corroboration, but usually she's right about the elemental parts of that experience, even if she's embellishing parts of it. And so now at this point of storytelling in my life, I can recognize where parts of what I try to do on the page come from and how it really was a natural thing for them. Like, I don't think any of them, maybe my dad was aware that he was funny, but I don't know if they would have categorized it in the way that I am.
Mm. I think oftentimes we take for granted the griots that we're surrounded by,
Yeah.
the subtle ways in which their influences help to inform how we just even tell stories,
Yeah.
not just about ourselves, but what happened during the day, what happened last week with cousin so and so forth.
Yeah.
Right. And so I can see that spirit carry through, even in some of your writings when you're featured in the New York Times Magazine or in Esquire, the ways in which you set the scene for the readers about whatever the topic is, whether you're talking to Michael B. Jordan or you're talking about voting or most recently, the aging experience,
Getting old. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I appreciate your transparency about even the storytelling of your own narrative, right? So it's one thing as a writer to be reflective about other people's stories, but even for yourself, you do a really good job framing things out for us and teasing us a little bit about the details of your life.
I think one of the things that I was hyper sensitive to when I was coming out, I was always working on what became the residue years, autobiographical fiction. And I was really sensitive to being portrayed or seen as a writer who only had that story to tell. And so I went to 2 graduate writing programs and worked really hard on craft because I was like, I don't want the experience to be my only currency.
Right.
And I was also, I think, smart enough to know that my story was pretty pedestrian in terms of what was happening in the 1980s and 90s, even in my neighborhood. But even if you look at what was going on last year, like the crack epidemic didn't just hit Northeast Portland. And so I didn't want that to be my currency. I wanted to really learn how to write. And I think if you filter your experience through craft, it pushes you other places.
Mm.
And with survival math, I was also really interested in the context of how we got to Portland, or where did cocaine come into the country, or how did Black families get portrayed as broken. I would always like start with what my experience was, and then I would go, okay, how far back do I need to go to contextualize this, or how wide do I need to go? And that was a really informative experience. And now I recognize that I was actually laying the groundwork to do the essay work for Esquire or the New York Times. Like, it's still the same approach that I use for every essay in survival math.
Hmm. I don't think it's fair for us as creatives that if there are certain things that transpire in our personal lives that we are marked by it in perpetuity.
Yeah.
But I think that it helps to frame and contextualize even why we approach topics in a very specific way, why we are attracted to particular themes and expressions. In your youth, in 97, you were convicted and you served a 16-month sentence at Mill Creek and Santiam Correctional Institutions for a Class B felony for the distribution of a controlled substance, right?
Yeah.
Even for that experience, you have said of yourself that you lived an at-risk life,
Yeah.
particularly in your youth. But obviously, that isn't necessarily your current state. And so for me, when I think about your choice of even writing the residue years, I'm curious for you to really explain what served as its inspiration. Why these types of stories? Why now? You don't want to be defined for the rest of your life about a very brief time in your youth, but character Champ in the book is based on Henry, right? A childhood friend.
Yeah.
You are writing through it. So I'm wondering what the inspiration is.
The genesis of the book is being in prison and hearing men talk about their experiences in a way that was hyperbolic, salacious. It was just storytelling, basically. But the currency in prison is like, if you sold 1 kilo, you had to sell 5. You got shot at 2 times, it had to be 7. So it was a lot of pathology being ranked in prison. And I thought, well, I got a hard knock life story too. Originally, it was like a currency. And then I was in college when I was arrested. I knew that my academic scholarship was being held for me. Closer to the end of my sentence, I thought, well, I need to start reacclimating to thinking and writing. what could I do in here that will help me kind of become a student again? And that was to start writing. And so I combined this idea that I had a story with this idea that I'm going to go back to school. And I just started writing a fiction. I only knew that there were two categories. Either it was true or it wasn't true. And I was like, well, I'm writing about people who are still in the life. So the true story is out. How about I try to write fiction, even though I had never attempted fiction? I think that was the start. 50 or 60 handwritten pages out of prison. I kind of put them away, but I think the real engine behind the residue years and really survival math was I had read something that was talking about inspiration for art. And it said that your inspiration can't be marred or the art that you're making is going to be marred. So like basically your inspiration had to come from a pure place. In the place of look at my hard knock life story, isn't it more terrible than other people's? Would not sustain 13 years of drafting and learning how to write. And so it became a thing that helped me figure out my family and almost like a love letter to my dear ones and my city. So that's the material that sustained that 10-year drafting process. But the initial thing was a real kind of selfish, prideful, it wasn't the right kind of motivation to begin it. But if I'm honest, that's how it started.
It's really about somehow our creative works as a way for us to process.
Yeah, that's what it became. Yeah. People hit me all the time, especially memoir, because they think all you have to do is live to write a memoir. You just need to have lived a certain amount of time. Like, do you know how much work it is to even learn how to write a book? Everybody is living. If that's the case, everybody on earth could write a memoir.
Right.
But to sustain what it takes to wake up every day, to redraft something, to get feedback, like I think I'm always really interested in writers who are not humble because most of what you get back from the world is that this doesn't measure or that it's
Mm.
not right, something you need to fix or people don't understand it. And that's at every level. Like if you're honest, the first thing that you write needs revision. So I think that in itself keeps you humble. I don't know the writer that wrote a book all the way through and it's the best thing that we've ever seen. I didn't know any of that going in though. I just thought, you know, you just put a couple words down in a year or two, you put a jacket on it and it's good.
One of the things that I think is really interesting, and I wanted to ask you about what it's like to tell these kinds of stories for a predominantly white publishing industry.
Yeah.
The movie is called
American fiction.
Yes. We are contending with how does one not sell out,
Yeah.
but then also what the industry is looking for.
Yeah.
I think in many ways, what's interesting is when you were talking about the fact that when we are creatives and we're putting work out in the world, it's like this baby where you're like, tell me, is it cute? Is it a pretty baby?
Yeah.
Right? Because you're like, I don't want anyone to tell me my baby's ugly. And who's the
Yeah.
audience? Right. And do you find that with the residue years, it's very niche in a way that it resonated
Mhm.
with people because of just the kind of fictional story that you were telling? And how did it land if we were to juxtapose that with Survivor Math, which we'll discuss soon?
I'm glad you brought up American fiction because the protagonist of that movie, he's like the black guy who's like, yes, but black is so expansive. I'm not like those black people. Don't make me write about that. Like I can write about Tolstoy, you know? There was a quote, Toni Morrison, who was the Tolstoy of the Zulus, as if blackness only has merit or value as seen through the eyes of whiteness. I think you can be one of those writers who are like pushing against what you think white people think blackness is. I'm like, this is who I am. Like, if you talk to me, I sound like this. If you move around with me, these are the people that I'm still with. So then why would I want to come out into the world trying to be somebody else? Also, because that's a heavy mantle to carry every day,
Mm.
all day, to like get into a classroom and switch up my diction. I don't know how to do that. Or I've never tried to do that. I was like, how can I be the most of myself on the page at all times.
Mm.
If you like that, that's cool. If you don't like that, well, then you don't like me. I sell books, but I'm not a million book seller. And so I think you kind of got to decide what is more valuable to you. Is it kind of angling for an audience that you think are natural readers and what they expect? Or is it like writing the stuff that's closer to the bone? And I will say that obviously Blackness is not a monolith. So there are people who have experiences, who grew up in private school and lived in cul-de-sac suburbs and went to Stanford or wherever, and they have a different experience than me. And that's okay, like to write about that. But that was not my experience. So if I try to take on, or like the old people say, put on airs, I think you can see through that. I also think this is something one of my mentors used to tell me. If you say the worst thing about yourself on the page, no one else can say it.
Mm.
And that's a kind of power. If I already said I did all this stuff and this is my people, and like, what could you possibly say? Now, I have received criticism, but I already did the hard work of working through what it would feel like to share that kind of trauma or those kind of foibles. So then when someone else comes along and has a criticism, to me, it's less powerful.
In your memoir, the collection of essays, Survivor Map, the stories of descendants of Africa in the US, specifically from your own family. So you talk about Marcus being from Cape Verde as one of the earliest descendants or ancestors that you can conceive of.
Yeah.
And you really frame these stories against the backdrop of American racism. So why was it important to write these experiences as second person narratives? And to also take people's pictures, right? And so it's very different feel from the residue years. That was fiction, but then this, it's a memoir. It's nonfiction. There's a lot of you in here, a lot of your family. What was the rationale for this particular methodology?
The genesis of the photographs were when I started working on the book, it was the beginning of Black Lives Matter. One thing that I have been loath to do is to speak immediately after something happens. So if there's a shooting, God forbid, tomorrow there are going to be pundits on, there's going to be people probably on their podcast. It's going to be a topic of conversation. And I always felt ill-equipped to speak in those moments because I hadn't processed or I didn't have enough information. And I just didn't want to be an echo.
Mm.
After Trayvon, I thought a lot about what it meant to be a Black man, to be perceived as dangerous. Question, like, what is it that people see in Black men that makes them look like a threat? Like, what is the narrative that you're developing in your head about these men? At the same time, I was also thinking about moments in my life where whether I lived or died was in question. And I thought, well, if I've had these experiences and my family members grew up in the same area, most of them during the same time, what are their experiences? And some of them I kind of knew, and some of them I just had no idea. And so it really was preparing those two things, like this idea that Black men look dangerous with this idea of survival. Then I chose second person because I thought, well, what are the chances that a reader will have had this experience? Well, second person is a way to collapse emotional and psychic distance, to make you always question, like, who is the you? Is it me? Is it this other person? And so that's why I got to the second person voice. So if you pair this idea of wanting to challenge Trayvon in his hoodie and he looked dangerous, other Black men who look dangerous, to my family, my experience, and the idea of what it means to survive and how you survive in these areas, figuring out the art of it, the craft of it is like, okay, how can I collapse as much space as I possibly can between reader and subject? And so that's how I got to the second person. I went to a photographer first and was like, hey man, like how much is it gonna cost? And he was like, oh, it's gonna cost you 12,000 and I own the rights. I was like, well, that's out. I better learn how to shoot this. But it also worked out better for me because it collapsed even the distance between me and my family. So I would take the photo and then I would talk to them. We already had a kind of intimacy that could not have existed with the photographer that I'd hired.
You needed to minimize the distance because it was a lot of intimate experience and truth telling.
Yeah.
I'm curious about What do you want readers to take away from the various representations of Black masculinity and Black womanhood?
I think if I had like one statement that I would be trying to make, it's that it's varied. And also, there's a moment in the residue years, and I probably did it in survival math somewhere too, where I'm like, I don't want your sympathy.
Mm.
It's easy to see people in the circumstances that I wrote about, at least in my books, and to want to give them sympathy, to say, oh, I'm so sorry that happened to you. Your life has been so tough. And I think that's honest. I'm like, okay, well, what's beyond that? I'm trying to write at what's beyond the kind of immediate response. Like, this is a bad person. Okay, what's beyond that? Okay, this is a person that's deserving of sympathy. Okay, what's beyond that? I feel like because I've had intimate relationships with family, friends, my gauge is different for humanity. I was in my class last week and I think somebody had got shot in the story that we were discussing. And I was like, I wonder how many of these people know someone who's murdered someone.
Mm.
Immediately you say, this person is a murderer, they're terrible. I think that would be most people's reflex would be to say that. But like, what if that person is your brother or your best friend and you can remember them like sticking up for you or giving you some food when you were hungry or in my case, like taking me to the basketball coach and saying, this is my little bro, he can hoop, put him on the team. So it complicates other people's kind of generalizations. And I think that's what I'm looking for is the complicated portraits. Not this person is good or this person is bad, but like here's a complicated vantage of this person. And you make the decision on where you want to put them. And even that's myself. If we talk about the scale, like I put myself in that and say, okay, here's all these things. Now you make the decision on how you want to feel about this person. But don't just go in saying he did this or she did this and she's terrible, or he did this and she did this, and let's infantilize them and make them only kind of receptacles for our sympathy.
So, how has writing served you spiritually then?
Mm. I guess it's the closest that I really get to spirituality. As a person who was raised religious, my great grandparents were Catholics. I was baptized like that. And then I lived with my dad for a little while, who was a Muslim. He had me praying in the morning and going to Arabic school. But that's all religiosity. And I think you can be inundated with religion and never become spiritual.
Mm,
And
true.
I think that if I had to define spirituality, which I've never done, that it has something to do with your relationship to humanity and how you feel connected to other people and like how you see the good in other people. And writing has forced me to do that. I remember working on a piece about Clarence Thomas. It was not my idea to write about Clarence Thomas, just for the people. If you come across that, I didn't want to do it. And they pushed me and they pushed me. And then my editor and I, we went to Savannah. And then we went to his hometown, which is Pinpoint, Georgia, which is outside of Savannah. It's not even big enough to be a town, it's a place. We were going around just basically knocking on doors of people we knew Clarence. I was about to give him Justice Thomas, but nah, he don't even deserve that shit right now. So we go to this one guy's house. I can't remember his name. He had a cool nickname. I want to say it was like Pig or something. And when we get there, my editor's the one that always goes and knocks on the door because he's a white guy. He feels more comfortable with just walking up on people's porches and knocking on their door.
Is that a word of advice? Have a white proxy?
Especially when you're in the hood, because you know, if you're in the hood, like you can't just be knocking on people's door. You gotta have a white guy like, hey, I'm looking for so-and-so. So he goes, knocks on the door. Let's say it's Pig. I really wish I remember this guy's name. He was so cool. But the man's wife answers, and she's like, he ain't here, baby, but he should be back any moment. Like he went to go get my medicine. These people are like in their 70s, possibly 80s. He's driving a blue truck. So if you come back and you see a blue truck in the field, it's him. So we're like, okay. So we get in the car, we driving out of his long driveway, and in is pulling a blue truck. So my editor rolls his window down. Hey, Pig, we're here writing a story on Clarence Thomas. You know Clarence Thomas. He like, yeah. He said, you mind if we talk to you for a minute? For some reason, everybody else is like, man, get out of here. Are you the police? This guy's like, sure, man. Like, let me drop off medicine to my wife. He comes back out and he talks. And the first question, I can't remember who asked it. I want to say I did because I want to claim this. And I say, do you remember Clarence when he was young? And this guy says, do I? I remember the night he was born. And he points to a tree that's like 100 yards away. And he says he was born right there. His property used to be right there. And then he starts to tell the night of Clarence Thomas' birth. It was like a wedding going on in the town, and
Wow.
talking about the weather and the copes over here. And while he's telling this story, I said, oh, I still don't like this man. I mean, I don't like him now, but I didn't like him then. But I was like, oh, even Clarence Thomas was just a baby being born in a town. I'm going to write the night of Clarence Thomas' birth. So if you ever read that story, that was me saying, where's this man's humanity?
Mm.
I mean, I think that lesson comes out of survival math. It really comes out of like taking these people, a lot of people would push aside or impugn, and then saying, okay, let me find what connects me to them, find whatever light they still have in their spirit.
Belonging to Blackness, proudly sponsored by Get Connected. Get Connected is a nationally recognized premier cross-cultural and inclusive business networking organization for professionals, business, and civic leaders, entrepreneurs from all cultures across industries and sectors. Our mission is to curate meaningful cross-cultural business and social connections while amplifying, celebrating, documenting, and showcasing the contributions of people of color and allies across our communities. To learn more, visit us at www.getconnected.com.
Act 2, The Road. All right, Mitchell Shunta Jackson.
Oh, no, not my government.
You are a father of two. You're a brother, an uncle, a friend, a writer, a speaker, a dreaming dreamer. So how do you play?
I have a hard time playing. I feel like my teens and my late childhood was wasted for me.
Mm,
So to be a kid who starts to think about adult things like, where we gonna get this lunch money from? Oh, who's gonna turn the lights on? Does your brother know his arithmetic? How he getting to school? Who's going to this parent-teacher conference? Like that shouldn't be the domain of 11, 12, up to say 20. So that was taken away from me. And then I jacked up my 20s. I'm damn near 30 by the time that I got a plan I'm trying to put in action, especially because that plan was literary and I wasn't literary before. Most writers, if they tell the story of how they came to writing, like, I used to love books when I was young. I would be in my closet reading with a flashlight. Not me. I always felt a deficit. And I have felt
mm,
this whole time that I'm trying to make up for a deficit. So I have a hard time doing things that I think aren't funneling into my art. The kind of loving, joyous things that I do, it's like going to a museum or watching a film or going to two people in conversation. Maybe I think concerts, I've tried to do more. I love stand up, but it's really hard to just be like, oh, this is just for fun. I don't know how to do that. I'm like, man, you 50. How many more books you got in you? Do you have 10 books in you? Like, what is going to be your mental capacity? Because you can keep writing. How long can you write at this level?
mm,
You start to look at writers who get in their mid 60s, late 60s, even if the output is there, the quality of the work has changed. And so I'm really, really, really hyper aware of like how much time I have left and what is it going to take for me to reach whatever And maybe I've already done it, which would really suck. But to reach whatever is the maximum of my capacities as a writer, like, how do I get there?
I would say, if you don't mind, if I offer a reframe,
Yes.
I would implore you to lean into the joys of just what life has to
Mhm.
offer. Because in order for you to be able to continue to be prolific and to be able to
Yeah.
write the stories that resonate with others, you have to live life and experience some of the joy. 50 is like the new 30. So you got a lot of time, my brother.
Yeah, that's what they say. While you were talking, though, I was just thinking like the most joyous moments in my life are with my kids.
Mm,
I don't know where this came from, but my daughter is so funny. Like, we'll just be having a conversation and she will say some stuff, and I'll be like, damn, I thought I was the funniest person in the family. I don't want to tell her, but she might be the funniest person in the family. So, those are like really, really joyous moments with her and then with my son. And then I go on an annual trip with my day ones. It's like 10 of us.
mm,
The first one we went to Vegas, and it was to stay connected, but also because we had two people in our clique who had died. They both died at the age of 47, or they died 2 years apart. And so we were like, none of us know who could be next. Like, let's make it an agreement for us to at least get together once a year and celebrate each other and kind of check in. So we do that. And that weekend, if you can imagine, I'm almost 50 or they're 52, a bunch of 52-year-old dudes trying to relive their youth and figuring out that they don't have that same kind of youth, but retelling the same stories. Somebody has too much to drink and he's the butt of all the jokes. So that is also a really important moment in my yearly calendar. It's not removed from the writing because the first time I did that trip, I actually wrote about it for the Times. And then it became a TV treatment.
mm,
Even though I'm present and experiencing that in my mind, I'm also like, this is also art. One thing that I have to do, especially in terms of the language that I use, is I have to be close to people that are from where I'm from,
mm,
because the cadences they speak with, the diction that they use, the memories that they have facilitate my memory or expand it. I can't do what I do without an umbilical to home. And so
mm,
while those are good for my spirit, they're also a part of the work that I do too.
mhm. I could see that. And I could also see that you are a sneakerhead, a former basketball player,
Yeah.
a hip hop aficionado, right? You like Too Short.
Uh-huh.
I suppose you writing the book Fly, the big book of basketball fashion, is paying homage to these other loves in addition to your children and your family, right?
Yeah.
So your book highlights the ways in which the civil rights movement, both pre and post 1968, and the sociopolitical context of the time and the advent of social media has helped the evolution of sport fashion, particularly the NBA, on and off court. In what ways did doing the research for the book push the boundaries for your own writing? And I think about this because I just think about the evolution also in the book where you kind of talk about how in 1949 they wore suits, and then we saw a transition in the 70s around flamboyant. So you cite to like Wilt Chamberlain, and then we think about the 1990s,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I think about my favorite Allen Iverson and Dennis Rodman versus like Michael Jordan suits. So, I mean, they are pushing boundaries, and you writing this, how did you push the boundaries for yourself? Because this is very different than Survivor Math and the rest of you.
Certainly very different. I will say the book was not my idea, so I want to start there and give proper due. It was my editor at Esquire who also recognized that I love fashion and that I was interested in basketball and was a former player. And I think what I learned, so there's this sport that I played on a team from the time I was 10 years old and through junior college. But just playing probably from the time I was 3 or 4 years old until I was into my 40s. I had favorite players like everyone else. I followed teams. I don't know how you could not have been a Jordan fan in the 90s. I never thought about the socio-political context of basketball. This book helped me reframe a sport I love in its socio-political context.
Mm.
Nothing exists in a vacuum. Everybody loved Iverson and his braids and baggy clothes.
And his tattoos, right?
Tattoos, exactly. Yeah. Don't forget about the tattoos. But I didn't think, how did we get there? People will say the dress code came out of the Malice in the Palace, but that's kind of true. But then it's so much broader than that. A thing that I really had much less knowledge about was the advent of basketball and the advent of the NBA. Then thinking about how those players were trailblazing and what kind of circumstances. We think about Jackie Robinson all the time, but like nobody really talks about the guys who integrated the NBA. And so it pushed me to think about a sport more critically than just being a fan. It's crazy now because I don't even call myself a basketball fan. I don't know if I call myself a fan of anything now. I try to be appreciative of certain things, but I think when I say fan almost prevents me from thinking critically about something.
Mm.
It's like an emotional response to it. And so I think it allowed me to kind of get past, I hate this team or I love this team or I hate this player and I love this player, to here's how these things came to be. And also thinking about the way in which the fashion was connected to how they expressed themselves creatively on the court. So one of my favorite pictures in the book is of this guy named Pete Maravich. When I was young, I had these videotapes. Pistol Pete Maravich learned how to dribble. So Pistol Pete was like Kyrie Irving, but a white version of him in the 1970s.
Mm.
I was looking for photos. I couldn't use a photo that I wanted to use. So then I was like, well, let me find a Pistol Pete one. And Pistol Pete is wearing a butterfly collar, a gold chain with a medallion, sunglasses. And I was like, whoa. The way that he's dressed now, to me, is like a direct expression of how he played. And so for me, that was such an exciting moment to see a player who presented themselves to the world as they presented themselves on the court. That makes a lot of sense.
Mm.
Project that I thought was going to be really short, take me a couple months in and out, nobody will read it. And it turned into like a real book that took a couple of years to write. And so I'm thankful that I did it because it was a lesson. Part of the lesson is take everything serious. Like there ain't no such thing as an in and out. If you really care about this, and I really care about it, like the same attention to language
Mm.
is in that book, that's in Residue, that's in anything that I want to put out in the world. My mentor used to say, how you do anything is how you do everything. And Fly is a really great example of that.
What's next on your journey?
It's a novel. It's like fusing the Residue years and Survival Map together because it's a historical novel, but it's also set partly in Portland. So it's taking research that I had to do for Survival Math and connecting it with the scene making and characterization and all those things that go into a novel. And it is driving me crazy. It feels like it takes everything that I think I know and every kind of creative talent or power that I have to make it. I believe that it's there, but it also feels impossible almost at every turn to do it.
Mm.
And then personally, trying to be more gentle with myself, taking walks, for example, take care of myself physically for sure. Also, like what is going to nourish my spirit too. So, spending more time with friends
Mm.
and family. I go home to Portland probably once a month, sometimes twice a month. I used to go and I would just, stay in my hotel, do my little business and leave. But now, like, nah, let me make sure I see my mama or my cousin or my brother. That is really important to me. Being a dad, I got a son that's off at college. I'm like, I want to make sure this youngster make it through because he the last one.
Right. I love that for you. The play is the self-care you're talking about.
Yeah.
Because really the play is the ways in which we find the things in our lives that give us passion, that fortify us. What I'm hearing you say is that on your continued revision of your life is to be able to continue to tap into ways in which you are fortified, the ways in which you connect with other people. And so we appreciate that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Act 3, Where We Land. Before we part, folks are interested in following you and your work. Where can they find you?
Instagram is probably my favorite because I like clothes. It's very easy to find a lot of my work on Esquire now or the New York Times Magazine.
And what's your social handle?
My social handle is Mitch S. Jackson.
Mitchell Jackson, thank you so much for being on Belonging to Blackness.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with others and be sure to subscribe. Find us on my website, www.indialoricwilmot.com. Follow us on IG and Facebook at belongingtoblackness_podcast for the latest fashion and accessories. Visit www.shopbelongingtoblackness.com. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.